The Great Purges, how Joseph Stalin turned a revolution against its own children. The year is 1878. In the small Georgian town of Gori, part of the Russian Empire, a boy named Stalin is born. The world would later know him by another name, Joseph Stalin. Stalin means man of steel. His childhood was anything but peaceful. His father was a shoemaker, often described as an alcoholic, who reportedly beat both his wife and young Stalin. His mother was deeply religious and wanted her son to become a priest. The boy survived smallpox, leaving scars across his face for life. An accident left one arm partially impaired. He grew up poor, often humiliated, and acutely aware of social hierarchy. Many historians think that these experiences may have contributed to a personality of Stalin that was suspicious, emotionally guarded, and intensely driven. At the end of the 19th century, Russia was enormous but deeply unequal. The Tsar ruled as an absolute monarch. Most of the people were peasants. Industrial workers lived in miserable conditions. Revolutionary ideas spread rapidly. Many of those ideas came from Karl Marx. Marx argued that history was driven by class struggle and that capitalism would eventually be replaced by socialism. A Russian revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin believed Marx's ideas could be adapted to Russia. Young Stalin became one of Lenin's followers. Then came World War I. Russia suffered catastrophic military defeats, food shortages, and political collapse. In 1917, the monarchy fell. A provisional government took over, but it was weak. In October 1917, Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized power in Petrograd. The Russian Revolution had begun. Stalin was not the charismatic face of the revolution, that was Lenin. Nor was he its brilliant military commander, that was Leon Trotsky. Stalin's strength was different. He quietly built networks. He remembered names. He placed loyal people into important positions. He understood bureaucracy. These qualities seemed boring at the time, but they would eventually make him the most powerful man in the Soviet Union. In 1924, Lenin died. No one knew who would succeed him. Many expected Trotsky. He was widely regarded as the intellectual star of the revolution. But Stalin had spent years building influence as General Secretary of the Communist Party. That title sounded administrative, but it wasn't. It allowed him to appoint thousands of party officials. Those officials, in turn, often supported him. Slowly, patiently, Stalin outmaneuvered rival after rival. By the end of the 1920s, he stood alone. Stalin believed that the Soviet Union had to industrialize rapidly. Factories required steel required money, and money had to come from somewhere. He looked to agriculture. The Soviet countryside consisted mostly of millions of small farms. Stalin decided they would be merged into huge collective farms. Private farming would largely disappear. The state would control production and collect grain. Many of the peasants resisted. Some slaughtered livestock rather than surrender it. Others hid grain, but the government responded harshly. Especially targeted were the so called kulaks, a label used for relatively prosperous peasants, but in practice often applied very broadly. Hundreds of thousands were deported to remote regions or labor camps. Collectivization caused massive disruption. Combined with unrealistic grain quotas, poor planning, and harsh state policies, it contributed to devastating famines, especially in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and parts of southern Russia. Millions of people died. Historians continue to debate some aspects of intent and terminology, but there is broad agreement that the human cost was enormous. By the early 1930s, Stalin had achieved extraordinary power, yet he felt increasingly insecure. This is one of the striking features of his rule. The more powerful he became, the more enemies he believed surrounded him. Was this calculated or was it genuine paranoia? Probably both. Historians generally agree that Stalin was deeply suspicious of others. He feared conspiracies, he feared betrayal, he feared that rivals within the Communist Party might remove him just as revolutionaries had removed the Tsar. Whether these fears were reflected mental illness cannot be diagnosed respectively, but politically they became central to how he governed. In 1934, a popular communist leader named Sergei Kirov was assassinated. We don't know who ordered the murder. Historians think it might be Stalin. Others argue that the evidence is insufficient. What is certain is that Stalin used the assassination as justification for a sweeping campaign against alleged enemies of the people. Now fear became government policy. The Great Purge begins. The years 1936 to 1938 became known as the Great Purge or the Great Terror. No one felt safe. Ordinary workers, army generals, senior communist leaders, even Stalin's closest associates, all of them were under threat. The secret police, the NKVD, arrested people by the hundreds of thousands, sometimes because of evidence, often because of fabricated accusations, sometimes simply to satisfy arrest quotas. A neighbor's accusation, a careless joke, a personal grudge, a harmless comment at your workplace, any of these could become a death sentence. And then came some of history's strangest spectacles, the Moscow show trials. Old Bolshevik revolutionaries, men who had fought besides Lenin and Trotsky, stood in court. They confessed to impossible crimes, crimes of spying, sabotage, working simultaneously for Germany, Britain, Japan, and even Trotsky. Many confessions were extracted through torture, threats, or pressure on families. The trials were carefully staged. Their purpose was not justice. Their purpose was to convince the people that every problem had been caused by hidden traitors. One by one, the revolution devoured its own founders. There was a machinery of terror. The arrests spread everywhere. Army officers, scientists, teachers, engineers, writers, factory managers, party officials. No profession was immune. Many of them were sent to the Gulag, a vast system of forced labor camps. Thousands were executed. Current historical estimates suggest that during the Great Terror alone, around 680,000 to 7 lakh people were executed, while over a million more were imprisoned. The commonly quoted figure is about 750,000 executions. Entire families lived in a fear of a knock on the door late at night. By now, Stalin no longer needed to threaten everyone personally. People censored themselves. They avoided saying the wrong thing. Children were taught loyalty to the state. Colleagues became suspicious of colleagues. Fear became woven into everyday life. This is perhaps the greatest achievement of terror. Eventually, people begin policing themselves. The Great Purge transformed the Soviet Union. Many experienced military commanders had been executed just before World War II. When Nazi Germany invaded Russia, historians believe that these earlier purges weakened the Red Army's leadership, although the Soviet Union ultimately recovered and played the decisive role in defeating Nazis on the Eastern Front. Soviet Union industrialized rapidly. It became a superpower. It launched the first satellite, the first human into space. Yet it also carried the memory of decades of fear. Millions had been imprisoned, deported, or executed under Stalin's rule. Families often remained silent about these experiences for generations. Joseph Stalin died in 1953. Ironically, many people were afraid to enter his room after he suffered a stroke. For years, everyone had feared making the wrong move around him. That fear lingered even as he lay dying. The man who had built a state on suspicion spent his final hours surrounded by it. Stalin's story is not simply about one dictator, it is about how institutions, fear, ideology, and concentrated power can combine to produce catastrophic outcomes. History suggests that when criticism becomes impossible, when courts lose independence, the press cannot question authority, and citizens become afraid to speak honestly, the risk of abuse rises dramatically. The Great Purge remains one of history's starkest reminders of how a revolution launched in the name of building a better society can, under concentrated and unchecked power, turn against many of its own people. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, share it as much as possible, and do subscribe to Nerdvana. Thank you so much for listening.